Hello and welcome to Fintech Insider Insights. I'm Kate Moody, Customer Strategy Director at LNFS. In this episode, we'll be discussing how you can best optimise the experience of a customer's very first touchpoint with a fintech product or platform, the onboarding. Whether it's a case of balancing friction and compliance when it comes to terms and conditions to gamifying the setup process, we'll discuss this crucial first stage in the customer journey. First up, I'm joined by my 11FS colleague and co-host, Joe Colchester, Head of Product for Pulse at 11FS. Joe, very nice to see you.
Great to be back on.
How's life? What's going on in Pulse?
Life is good. Pulse is doing well at the moment. So we're working very hard on our upcoming feature, which is going to be a feature benchmarking addition to the whole platform. So it's going to get a lot more quantitative Pulse, adding to the new brand page that we've got. And in a kind of industry first, that's going to be feature benchmarking with a jobs to be done lens. So we're really excited about that. There's going to be loads of data viz, and we're going to start with UK banks and challenges.
Yeah, I've seen some sneak previews. It's hot stuff. So yeah, excited for the world to get to see that too. Next up, it's a Fintech Insider debut for Andrew Denholm, Head of Product Design at Chip. Big welcome to the podcast, Andrew. Thanks for taking time out to join us. Would you mind introducing a bit about your work and Chip more broadly, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm quite new to Chip. I've just started 4 months ago. So it's a little bit of a whirlwind of learning about Chip and what they do. So I'm kind of new to it too. But Chip is basically a wealth growth app, which really focuses on cash interest rates and building interest through kind of holding of money. And also they're kind of pivoting to a more investment side. So they're trying to get more and more people involved in investing. So I'm kind of coming in and learning all about the kind of internal processes, seeing where I can kind of make an impact, trying to learn about different tooling. So bringing in 11FS, for example, just really kind of starting out at my journey in Chip, really.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, 4 is my lucky number. So I feel like this is going to be a great month for you. I've just got that vibe. Well, yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. I'm looking forward to hearing your take as we go through. We have a welcome return to the podcast for Kish Patel, Head of Design at Lightyear. Always great to welcome people back to the podcast. What have you been up to? What have Lightyear been up to since we last had you on?
Yeah, I guess we're still building this simple and approachable way for people with businesses across the globe to put their money to work, essentially. So yeah, we're off. I can't remember when the last time we spoke, but yeah, Lightyear, maybe for your listeners who don't know, with Lightyear, you can invest in stocks, funds, you can get interest on your uninvested cash without the typical unnecessary barriers and fees that you get traditionally. And my role there, I look after design. So that's mostly like product. So like building out this really slick way to manage your money. I don't know, have you had a go with it, Kate, Joe? Anyone?
I'm not.
I have.
I know Joe would have done. Yeah. Joe uses everything. So, but yeah.
We're a big fan. We're a big fan of Pulse.
Oh, good. Yeah, the big thing, I think, like maybe last year, I can't remember when I spoke to you last, but we launched our web version. So that's like really taken off and quite fun to like do stuff from scratch, you know.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks very much for joining us once again, and looking forward to hearing your take on onboarding as we jump into the show. And finally, we have another Fintech Insider debut for Adam Tarpey, Head of Product at Metro Bank for retail and business banking. It's great to have you join us, Adam. I'm sure life is very busy managing all of those things. What have you been up to at Metro Bank recently?
Yeah, lots of exciting things. I think product development at Metro Bank is unique and fast paced because of the bank offers such a wide range of products, everything from retail all the way up to corporate. And when you think about all the different channels as well, it makes it really interesting. So not just digital, but obviously we have the stores as well up and down the country. So thinking about onboarding journeys there as well. I think some highlights, we've recently launched a new mortgage product, limited company buy-to-let, which has been a great success. And then, of course, topic of today's conversation around enhancements to our onboarding journey. So constantly iterating all the existing products and journeys we have. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. Really excited.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for joining us. As you say, really excited to get your take, particularly kind of as working in that space that has these different touch points with customers. So really, really excited. So let's jump in. To kick off the show, we're going to have an initial look at why onboarding is so vital. It might appear to be an arbitrary step in a process that has little to do with the main product, but this is really the customer experience pinch point where loyal customers can be shaped and also can be lost. So we're going to take a quick look at the core principles that shape a great onboarding and how the experience can fundamentally shape a customer's relationship with the company. Joe, I'll let you get us started. From your perspective, why is it so crucial to get the onboarding process right?
It's so crucial because it's the first significant moment where there's contact between the brand and the user. So first impressions are incredibly important. So conveying trust, building that relationship from the get-go. And it's really make or break. Will that user actually be compelled to join and use that product, or will they be put off and kind of disengage with it? So it's a really, really important moment of first contact, and getting that right is incredibly important for the building that relationship. But also, there's huge commercial implications as well, because will they actually become a dedicated user or not? So it's incredibly important.
Kish, would you agree? What's kind of the most important part of onboarding from your perspective?
I wanted to ask, like, by onboarding, what do you mean? Like, is it the form filling, like the exchange of like information from the customer, or is it because the way I guess to me, there's like product consideration, which is like landing pages, and you could say like adverts as well, but mostly like landing page, like pricing, like trying to work out, okay, is this a good fit for me? Even like the app store screenshots, and maybe when you download the app and you get those like swipey screens, like that sort of thing. And then the onboarding is like, where's your name? Where do you live? Upload your documents. And then there's like this post onboarding, which is like, okay, now upload, I don't know, send some money or make a deposit. So if we're talking about that form filling part, the most important part, I don't know, it's all one thing. I would say that the most important part is probably everything before, because at that part, I mean, by that I mean like for the product consideration aspects, like, is this product a good fit for me? Is it solving the problem that I have? Is it at the right price point I have? And when we get into like the form filling, it's kind of like, okay, I'm kind of convinced now. Have my information now. Obviously, there's like things that can go wrong there, but to me, like, maybe the most important part is that prior part where you're really trying to convince them that your product is a good fit.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really excellent point to raise. I don't want us to get like too profound. We're recording this on a Friday afternoon, right? It's going to be quite intense for all of us to get really deep really, really soon. But yeah, I suppose Adam, Kish raises a really interesting point. Like, again, I think probably a lot of people do assume that onboarding is just you plugging your details into an app or onto a form, and kind of that transactional component of it where you supply information in return for an account. How do you see it? When does onboarding actually start?
Yeah, I think it's that first interaction with the customer, because ultimately the customer doesn't always necessarily want to onboard straight away. They might want to have a look inside. I think trading accounts do this very well, like CMC markets, where you can go in, have a look around first, and then onboard afterwards. I think onboarding is a good way to really understand what your customer's looking for from your product as well, because sometimes companies have generic onboarding journeys, but actually they're coming for one particular reason. So it's really around kind of those kind of key principles. And I think the last thing, which I think has been well done by a lot of companies out there, is thinking about transparency, especially when things around open banking and auto ID, around explaining why we're collecting the information. So it's that communication and value exchange as well throughout each stage of the journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose, Andrew, just give you a say as well from your perspective at Chip, like, where do you guys see the onboarding journey as starting and ending? I suppose to Kish's point as well, like it's not just about where it starts, but when do you consider someone to be fully onboarded? Is it when they've just completed the information? Is it when they've actually actively engaged with a product? Like, how do you guys see it?
Yeah, at Chip, we're obviously just an app, so we don't have any other engagement with the user. So it tends to be the website is where we really can start that onboarding process, really try and explain and sell the vision of what Chip is. And then actually for Chip, it's really just trying to get them in the door as quickly as possible so they can actually start using the app. I think we've tried to keep our onboarding process as simple and as short as possible, because we feel as soon as we get the user into the app, then we can actually do that second phase, which is probably actually getting them to engage with our product range, which we feel the sooner they do that, actually the more successful we're going to be as a company, but also probably the user will get more out of it. So we try to keep it sharp and snappy, and just speak in a kind of really human, simplistic way, so that we don't over engage. We obviously might want to look at that in the future, where we can maybe kind of diversify how we might want to actually engage different users. And I think that's something that we would certainly be looking at in the near future, where we try to understand our customers a little bit better during the onboarding flow. Because I think we're doing it maybe with Chip is a little bit generic, and there's probably more opportunity there where we can actually be a bit more personal to the actual different user needs.
Yeah, no, absolutely, that makes sense. And Joe, obviously, you see hundreds of these onboarding journeys in your work with Pulse. What is it that makes a great onboarding experience from your perspective? Who are the kind of real standouts who are executing this well?
So I think what makes a really good onboarding is it being streamlined, of course, establishing brand tone of voice and identity, but also getting to the point of utility really quickly. Actually, I am going to call out Chip as being very good at this, because it takes a few minutes, and then you're prompted to top up your account immediately. So you're immediately getting the utility out of it. So it's very quick, and then you're immediately getting market leading rates. So it's a kind of pairing utility with speed and establishing trust. I think those three things are very, very important.
Yeah, I've only been at Chip for only 4 months, so I can't take any of that credit, but I'm glad I'm here to take some of that.
Oh, you should just take the credit. Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
Kish, how do you kind of get the balance right in designing that process between just capturing the information, but also wanting to convey the brand and wanting to really start to introduce the brand to the customer? How do you strike that balance?
Yeah, it's difficult because you don't want to over design things and slap loads of elements on the screen. At the end of the day, you're just trying to capture the least amount of information possible for the customer to start using your product. So that's the primary thing. I think there are some UI flourishes or little flourishes you could put in that show the brand, whether that's something with the progress bar if you have a progress bar, or definitely, to Joe's point, the tone of voice, speaking in language that the user is going to be familiar with when using the product later. Yeah, other than user interface, it's kind of and tone of voice, it's quite difficult to do more than that without getting in the way, really, of what they need to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Adam, obviously, you've got kind of a slightly more nuanced challenge at Metro Bank because you have all these different channels where a customer could potentially start the onboarding process. So how do you guys manage that? What does it look like if someone onboards solely through digital channels versus if they maybe come into branch, or if they do a mixture of the two? How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's obviously sometimes a different type of customer. A lot of the type of customers we see, especially within the retail space, value that kind of in-store experience in terms of onboarding. I think what we're really trying to harness at the moment and continue to drive is omni-channel experience. So as we know, with any digital application or onboarding journey, sometimes there are scenarios where it will need to go into a referred queue. And we're thinking about, edge cases where actually, instead of sitting in a referral queue for X number of days, you can go into store and it can be kind of sorted out. We're seeing a lot of that recently around biometric residency permits. And again, the in-store experience is really helping us differentiate ourselves from some of the digital challenges out there. So I think that's one of the key thing. And again, it's thinking about, with our onboarding journeys, not just asking questions for the sake of it, making sure that we're using that information either post onboarding or as part of that decisioning. Because, when we think about the outcome the customer wants, sometimes that extra bit of information is going to be able to help us give them a better lending decision, or, a better rate, or, when we think about lending. But, there's lots of examples where we can use that for later on their kind of product life cycle.
Adam, can I just add to that? I think it's a really good point. And I think that transparency of telling the user at each step why you are collecting that data, why you're asking for it, really, really helps. Chime are very good at this checking account in the US, where everything they ask for, even your surname, date of birth, they're saying we're using this for this reason, because there's an innate distrust of a lot of financial services and especially data collection. So I think it's a really good point, and it's a really important thing to do, is just to kind of constantly tell the user why you're collecting something. Otherwise they might get suspicious and drop out.
Absolutely. And it aligns with, I guess, the regulation that's come in around consumer duty as well, and just making sure that, we have that high standards across the whole industry, which is better for everyone.
Yeah. And Andrew, I suppose, you talked about some of the products that Chip is sort of looking to move into. How do you think through that from an onboarding perspective? Because like Joe says, I think we all recognise and celebrate when people can be very transparent about why they're collecting data. But how do you manage that when you don't necessarily know for sure what information you might need in the future, like what products you might want to offer a customer? Do you kind of just try and collect as much information as possible in the hope that it will cover you if you diversify out into other parts of the roadmap or offer new products? Or how do you guys approach that?
Well, as I say, with Chip, we've been quite lean on collecting that information. And I think that's something that we might want to investigate, maybe adding into the future, because ultimately at the moment we don't have a huge amount of information about the customer at that entry point. So what we kind of do at Chip is we offer multiple kind of routes to different product services at that kind of end flow. So it's really up to the user then to kind of go off and select what they want to investigate. Whereas maybe there's other ways of doing it, which is actually collecting more and more data and then really narrowing the customer into a specific flow that we feel is appropriate for them. We feel that at Chip, because our offering isn't huge, there's enough for the customer to go and find what they need just in a normal kind of in-app user experience. So I think when we might grow into different areas, and maybe Chip might go into like pensions and other kind of junior ISAs later down the line, then there maybe is a case to actually start narrowing that entry point, because there's more of a diverse opportunity. But because our kind of products range is relatively narrow, I think it's not really needed in our onboarding. So I think it's just about what the kind of need of the app is at that point of entry.
I'm definitely going to interpret that as Chip announces move into pensions in groundbreaking.
Okay, well.
No, that'll be really exciting to see. Kish, so far we've I suppose mainly focused on the good parts of onboarding and kind of what makes a great onboarding experience. But inevitably, no matter how great an experience is, inevitably there are going to be some customers that don't complete it, who drop out, who get distracted. How do you try and mitigate or minimize that in the first place? And what do you do when that does, despite all of your best efforts, inevitably happen? If a customer gets lost or distracted, what do you do?
Yeah, I guess it comes back to asking the bare minimum, or asking only what you really need to ask, and really informing the customer why you're asking it, to try and stop them from leaving, or trying to get them through that process as quickly as possible. There are places that we do see like drop off normally when they need to get like a document, all these finance apps, you need to upload some document. So fed up of like fishing through the drawer getting my ID document out, and people just don't have that, right? They don't have that to hand. So being able to save the progress of that, being able to come back later and the app memorizing that, prompting them as well through, once you get to that point, you've got their email, maybe you've got they've turned on push notifications. You can prompt them to come back. With great difficulty, you can prompt them to come back, but that's kind of like the only tools you really have. But saving progress, because the ID part is quite an annoying one, and where people just aren't really prepared and just not prepared. Maybe they just want to have a little look around as well. So being able to like quit the flow, that's what you can do. Like you can quit at that point and have a little look around at the product and really think like, is this gonna be worth it? Is going upstairs right now gonna be worth my time? That's kind of what we've done, and it works well so far.
You mentioned with great difficulty getting them back, because obviously you can send them those push notifications you mentioned or emails. Are you kind of saying that once they've left, it's really, really hard to actually get them to re-engage, and it's better to try and make it as lean as possible first time round rather than more comprehensive?
Yeah, I think so. When you're trying out a product for the first time, I think most people are doing it at the point of recommendation, right? It's not like you have like maybe you do, maybe you're organizing like in your to-do list, like, I've been meaning to check out that app Lightyear, and then you get to it, and then you don't mark it done, so you keep going back to it. But maybe a friend told you about it, and you're like, let me check it out, let me have a little look, and at that point is where people are gonna convert or not. Most of them are anyway. I think with like, when did iOS let you like delete the app from your home screen, but it wouldn't be deleted? It would just be like deleted somewhere off my home screen. There's so many apps now that are just in the bin. There are just so many of them that are just there that I never will engage with again. So I think trying to get it right the first time is super important, and where we really try and make tweaks and adjustments and speed up, the verification process with one partner or switch to another, because this with great difficulty. I think is verification comes with great difficulty. That's like, I think, the hardest part of the onboarding to get right, just because you can't build that facility, you can't build that part internally most of the time. I quite like what Adam was saying, where they're taking ID documents physically to a person, because I mean that's all under your control. It's tricky to get them back, basically, from my point of view.
I think one thing you could consider, I mean, again, when we think about why people come to companies that have various products, is really capturing that intent up top, and then essentially, if they're not ready to onboard at this moment in time, or essentially activate the account, which is where it becomes valuable for kind of companies, is really kind of continue to inform them and keep them updated about the development cycle that's going on within your company. So if they've signed up because they're interested in deposit products or the savings rate, you're keeping them updated outside of the initial onboarding touch phase. I think another big drop off for a lot of companies is the referral queue. So as we know, there's lots of referral queues, and something we've done quite successfully, thinking around the psychology of when you're in a queue. Think when you're at a supermarket, you want to know how long is the queue going to kind of go for. Is it moving? No one's skipping the queue, and that transparency through that kind of referral stages has often been a good way to keep customers engaged and coming back, because they know how long it's going to take.
Yeah, and I suppose one thing, you talk about capturing other intents. I suppose from my lens, I do a lot of customer research, customer analysis. I know that there's probably a lot of pressure on the person who owns the onboarding flow to put lots of other data points into that journey, so that you can understand what it is that person's interested in, what else they're doing, what the kind of who they are as a customer. How do you, Adam, you must get all these requests all the time, right? Like, can we understand X? Can we understand Y? How do you make that trade-off? How do you balance that?
Yeah, I think naturally it is a trade-off. I think, it's all about the MI that you have on the particular journey and being able to A/B test some things as well. Essentially that's the best way often to prove something is a good way to follow. And again, whether you can do kind of soft launches with certain things, again, we're lucky we have the store journey that we can actually try these things out in terms of A/B testing as well. We talked about this concept of a fake door as well, where essentially you're showing intent by users clicking on a particular area that maybe has not been fully developed, and again that kind of builds the business case as to why we think this particular journey or part of the journey should be invested in.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Okay, we're going to take a quick pause here for a short break before we dig into the fintech players nailing the onboarding experience and what we think might happen in the future to improve it even further. It's all coming up after this super quick break, so don't go anywhere.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our audience gets a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Welcome back to Fintech Insider Insights, where this week we are taking a deep look into how to do a great customer onboarding. Before the break, we looked at the importance of this very first user touchpoint and the customer engagement and loyalty that can be built from a great onboarding. Now we'll be looking at the innovation happening to make this process both painless and thorough, and how fintechs can measure the success of their onboarding journeys. Andrew, you very humbly, in the first half of the show, refused to take credit for Joe's praise of Chip's onboarding to date, but obviously you will be able to take full credit for the innovations that come up in the future. So what do you see coming next in the onboarding space? Not necessarily, you don't have to tell us Chip's secrets, right? But what do you think are the innovations that are going to continue to shape the onboarding processes that customers have?
Yeah, I mean, as we know, the space is getting more and more competitive, not just for Chip, but business banking, which I used to work in. So actually trying to get new customers is becoming harder and harder. So yeah, innovation is going to be essential. What that looks like, it really depends on the company's direction. I think gamification is a good way of doing it, but also it just depends if people are really wanting to have that type of experience. So for example, at Chip, we're not sure if people really want to be making avatars, for example. That's probably not the right direction for us. But do they want to be rewarded for good habits or behaviors in their wealth growing skills or skill set? So we're kind of maybe starting to look into kind of rewarding people for good behaviors, and what does that look like? Is that a gamification point of view, or is that just explaining to people what their not their credit score is, but their wealth score is? So how do we actually make that more apparent that, you know, you're on the right track compared to your peers, and you're actually building wealth in the right way, and therefore you deserve, I don't know what that looks like, a prize or a score or something like that. So we're looking at different ways to do that, and whether that comes into the onboarding aspect, and that might be an avenue that we look into.
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting. Kish, is it unrealistic to ever expect onboarding to be fun? Like, do you think anyone will ever kind of manage to achieve an onboarding journey where everyone completes it and goes, "Wow, I loved it"?
It's just an inconvenience, I think. You don't have to do it with any other kind of software other than, like, it seems, than with financial software. Do you remember, like, when you just have to sign up with login with Facebook? Do you remember logging with Facebook? You just click the button and you're in. And the company gets all your email and your little avatar and your name. And now with all these financial products, you just got to fill in loads of forms. I don't think anyone will rave about onboarding unless it's like really over designed. I tried like a little thing one time, you know, like designing like for people that have been referred, and they get like 10 or 15 pounds in free shares, and having it like shiny and doing something like in the top right hand corner as you're going through onboarding. But it's taking up space, like it's distracting, makes the brand feel a bit cheap. So no, I mean, just focusing on trying to streamline it, I think, is the best thing possible. Going to your compliance team and like asking like, okay, which questions can we remove? Which questions can we ask later? Trying to do it that way, I think, is probably nicer for the customer, because this kind of stuff just has to feel invisible, in my opinion, or invisible as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Adam, we haven't really touched on regulation a huge amount so far, but obviously it is, to Kish's point, a huge part of what makes onboarding within financial services different to onboarding in other digital spaces. How much influence do regulators have over the innovation that is possible in this kind of space?
Yeah, I think it's always working with the regulators. I think when you look at, again, things like open banking, obviously we've got open ID verification kind of being the next big frontier, or open finance. So I think it's working with the regulators before and after. Naturally, I think regulation, especially within banking, is the cornerstone to all products and services. So it's super important, and ultimately it's there for the consumer to make sure that they're protected or the business. So I think that's important. I think there's some interesting things going on at the moment with ID verification companies where they look to create a similar kind of concept to a credit bureau, where there's an ID bureau, and that might make onboarding simpler. So for example, if you've onboarded with a non-financial services kind of app and done a number of security checks, they could bring that information across into a financial company as part of the onboarding, which would help as well. So I think it's a cornerstone. I think there's always going to be advancements, and just making sure that we continue to make sure they're appropriate for the type of customer that's coming in.
Yeah, no, I know there's a lot of chat as well about kind of the role that digital wallets might play in this space. Obviously, you start to consolidate lots of your kind of cards and your payment methods in one space. Might you start to kind of consolidate ID within your Apple Wallet or your Google Wallet as well. Joe, I guess Pulse maybe sometimes gives you a bit of a good read about the innovations that are emerging that our audience are most interested in. Like, who are the people that you think are pushing the boundaries the most and starting to introduce interesting things in that are shifting the dial?
I think some people have started to experiment with onboarding via chatbots that can strike a chord with some generations. So it's still kind of remains to be seen how successful that could be. But we are seeing developments there. So that's quite an exciting space where it's more kind of chat led. But really, I think a lot of the innovations I think come from the partners. Technology partners supporting onboarding flows. So the UX of these flows are slightly at the mercy of these technology partners. So whether it's ID verification or anti-money laundering, the effectiveness of these will lead to better onboarding.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely really interesting to watch. And one thing, again, we've talked a lot, I suppose, primarily about onboarding from the perspective of an individual customer, but also business onboarding. I know that, again, Andrew, as part, you mentioned it, it's your background. Adam, obviously, you covered that in part as well in your role at Metro. So where does innovation in business onboarding compare to the where we're up to in the retail space? Adam, maybe I'll throw to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to think about, and makes it challenging sometimes, the different types of size and revenue of a business, and therefore their expectations about what onboarding looks like is very different. So for example, if you're large corporate and commercial, you're probably going to be filling in with your relationship manager or have a bit more of a tailored experience. I think, again, a lot of companies and Metro Bank are looking at it as well as how can we almost turn that micro to medium-sized SME onboarding journeys to kind of mirror a retail kind of slickness. There's a lot of good information we can get out there for things like Companies House, either directly or via third-party vendors. So pre-population of data, and again, naturally there's a lot more questions that we have to ask around business activity, international payments, etc. So I think there's a lot of work to do there. The way that a lot of companies are looking to do it now is a bit modular in terms of the API build. So they're splitting up into sections. You almost have a soft account first. I think Tide do that quite well. A soft account first, and then they kind of upgrade the account as you go through it, and do the checks in the background. So I think the industry is kind of heading a little bit more towards that kind of versus a kind of 40-page kind of onboarding journey.
Yeah, no, I think 40 pages does not sound fun for anyone. Andrew, what's your take? Obviously, you've moved into sort of more of a retail focus now in your role at Chip, but what was the biggest pain point from a business perspective in your previous role?
Yeah, at Tide Business Banking, we definitely had problems with just general KYC and effectively worries about fraud risk. So like Adam touched upon, trying to get the customers in to a level where they thought that they kind of had an account, and then you do more of the deeper checks later on. I think that can kind of break it up in terms of your mind, like going to an airport and they put you in the terminal a million miles away. By the time you get there, your bags are ready. Kind of similar approach in onboarding, trying to make it feel like you're already onboarded. You feel like you're part of the customer base, but also, especially in business banking, because it took so long to create a business bank account, everything felt slick, because effectively it could have been 2, 3, 4 working days if you were going into a branch previously. So actually customers were really quite open to waiting for like an hour or 2 hours or whatever it might be, even a day, because actually the previous experience was hellish. So actually it was quite quite a win, really. So it wasn't such a bad thing. Whereas maybe something like Chip, the expectation is actually I want an account ASAP, and I want that now, because that's kind of standard now. So there's just different expectations. Is just an interesting way to kind of look at the onboarding expectations and what you should be delivering from your different app.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely fair. I suppose one thing, when as part of my job, I interview lots of financial decision makers in businesses of different sizes, and I think the one thing you start to hear more and more, though, is people have an expectation of like a business banking experience, but at the same time, they're also using Chip or Lightyear or Metro Bank in their personal lives. Or their children are using some of these new apps, or friends using them. So people are still having these very slick experiences within the retail space, and are just I think more and more starting. I feel like the expectation gap is just narrowing, or is going to continue to narrow. I don't know, Adam, you're nodding your head a lot, and guess you cover both, right? So maybe you can see both sides of it.
Absolutely. And I come from a fintech background before Metro Bank, and essentially you do start to see that. And I think you're right that transition to expectation management is important. And again, there are lots of good third-party companies out there that are starting to be able to provide the infrastructure to be able to make that onboarding experience as quick as possible. But obviously they need to consent to things like open banking sometimes as well. So, but the educational piece from retail, open banking comes across there as well. So there's lots of benefits with that knowledge transfer as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned third parties. Again, keen to sort of touch on that a little bit in this section of the show where we're thinking ahead to the future. How much of the innovation in onboarding do you think is driven by an individual organisation, or how much of it is reliant on your openness to partnerships, being integrated with other people? You mentioned it, Adam, so I'll come back to you first and throw out the rest of the group.
Yeah, so I think there definitely has to be a willingness and an openness to consistently scanning the market to see what people are doing, whether that's at events or kind of vendor discussions. Again, thinking about naturally, when you're at a big bank, it can take a long time to rip something out and replace it with something else. And therefore, you need to understand how you can pilot this or run it alongside this. I know a lot of, kind of fintechs out there run like dual ID companies, for example. So it's quite easy to switch A/B testing there. So I think it's willingness, testing it before, and then obviously looking to understand what problems it's really trying to solve.
Yeah. Kish, obviously from a Lightyear perspective, you're sat in a fintech, in theory, able to do things in this sort of much faster, more nimble way. That's, I suppose, as Adam says, that is a stereotype, right? That it's the kind of the bigger traditional incumbents that find it harder to tap into new technologies, new partnerships. Is that your experience at Lightyear? Do you guys have the ability to go out to the market and look at new offerings that are emerging from third parties and just switch things around, or is it more complex than that?
It's easy in theory, but you really want to be confident, right? If you're going to sign getting a new vendor in, or it's costly and takes a long time to integrate, and that's time and money they could have spent elsewhere. We're really trying to invest in the best investing experience. We're trying to build that part ourselves, and don't mind like what Adam was saying, the ID verification, that being like kind of given to third parties to do. It is easy to do, but yeah, it's the integration part and the negotiation part. This time is quite valuable, I think, if you're a young company.
Yeah. Andrew, would you say that's, how does that reflect your experience at Chip or Tide even in the past? Again, I think there is a stereotype that fintechs have it easy, that they can just plug and play and switch around things. Is it quite as rosy as everyone seems to portray it?
No, mostly because, while you might be nimble and able to pivot quite quickly, it just means that you got a smaller team. So actually, like Kish says, once you try to take something out, maybe it's a third party, you're sacrificing a feature or an innovation or something else. So all of these considerations have to be quite well thought out. And working with third parties, you have to understand how much you can actually put your own brand element into it too, because that can actually be quite disruptive as you go through an onboarding process. No normal person thinking about, this is not Chip supplying this or Tide supplying this. This is another third party. So that can feel quite weird, and it can be quite disruptive. And it's you're taking maybe something quite sensitive, where it's a passport photo or a driving license. So you have to consider the actual usability from a kind of user's point of view. So actually being able to put your own brand into that, working with the third party and making sure that it's a white label that can be kind of slightly pivoted to your own brand identity. It's all considerations. And unfortunately, in my experience, designers or maybe even some product people haven't even been brought into conversations early enough to actually ask those questions. So by the time it gets to you as a designer, you might not even be able to then actually do much with it. And it's actually out of your hands. So it's just trying to make sure that you're in the conversation at the right points when third parties are picked.
They're so bad. They're so bad, some of these third parties. Oh my God. Like you can change the color, but you can't change the font. Or there was one that we were using where you take the photo and it says some like funny message at the end, which some engineer at that company thought was a good idea, but like you can't customize it. So everyone sees this like good to go or something wild like that.
Yeah.
Like I haven't found one that is like perfect, that is invisible. Like I say, it's just like, oh yeah, that's Lightyear. It's like got their branding, or it's got like their weird font, or it's got some stupid message at the end of it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I already kind of know what Kish's answer maybe is going to be, like the totally anonymous third party. But I was going to ask you to close out the show, what innovation would you most like to see within the onboarding space, either kind of if your particular business, your sector of the market, or for another? So, Kish, if we have this conversation again in 2 years' time, what innovation do you want to have come into the onboarding space that isn't there currently?
Well, I quite liked what you were talking about with the ID in your digital wallet. I think Apple Pay or the Apple Wallet in some states in the US, you have like your driver's license in there. Am I right? If I made that up, if I dreamt that. If I've dreamt it, it should be a thing, right? It should just be able, kind of like with Apple Pay, verify, press the verify button, it jumps to the Apple Pay, or doesn't even jump there, and it's just like, okay, this person is legit. We've seen their document, just take our word for it. Or it could be go to your bank, kind of like with open banking, right? The bank has done all their due diligence on me already. Like why, every new fintech that I use, that I then pay money to from my bank, as a deposit, I have to like verify with myself again. So either go to the bank to do the verification somehow, or go to my Apple Pay wallet. I would love to see that because I don't want to be fishing for that ID document in that drawer in 2 years' time, basically.
Yeah, fair. Adam, what about you? What would you most like to see?
Yeah, so we touched on, I guess, ID bureaus, which I think would have a good long-term impact across industries, not just fintech and finance. I think biometrics linked to phone identity is probably going to be a big one as well, that could change it. And then I guess more as a theme, just making sure that the onboarding journey isn't just generic and vanilla. Ultimately, depending on the type of customer that comes in, there's a slightly tailored or different onboarding approach for everyone, just so that there's no segments that kind of left out or disappointed as part of that journey. So I think that's hopefully something that everyone's going to aim for.
Yeah, no, absolutely, sounds cool. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, I would probably just echo what both the guys have said already. I think something that just makes it more seamless. Nobody wants to be doing onboarding. They want the product that you're effectively selling them. So something that can actually kickstart that as fast as possible. And just, more personalization. I think if we can try and know who you are as an individual faster through open banking sources, or whether you've got some previous kind of set priorities of what you're looking for, that could be just such a game changer. Because as companies try and do that and fish for that information, that's the last thing the user actually wants to do. They just want to be shown what they care about. So any kind of streamlining would be ideal.
Yeah, I think I see. As on the topic of personalization, I think the thing I'd most like to see is almost like, I have no idea how it'd be designed. I'm sure it'd be very complex. But I'd like to see customers being given more options, almost to exchange their data for enhanced experiences and services. Like actually, when you onboard, not necessarily at the point of onboarding, but actually you capture the basic information that you need. But actually, if I'm willing to tell you X, Y, and Z about me as an individual, or my goals, or my broader financial situation, like actually, can there be more of a value exchange there, where actually kind of me creating this strong relationship with you as a brand means that you can offer me more or offer me different things. I'd love to see kind of people start to play around in that space a bit more. Joe, final word to you as our onboarding guru from from the world of Pulse. When we come back in 2 years' time, what's going to be the innovation that you're most hoping will just be front and center?
Well, I'm not sure about front and center, but something that I'm looking forward to seeing in onboarding and more generally is what Apple recently allowed products on the App Store to use the NFC chip, the card reader chip in iPhones. And I think that it could be a real moment of delight. Maybe you could hold your card to top up for the first time, hold your card to add it to the aggregator or something like that. I think I'm quite looking forward to seeing innovation there.
Cool. Awesome. Well, sadly, that wraps up today's discussion. Thank you so much to you all for taking time out to join me and to share your perspectives for our listeners. Where can people find out more about you and what you're working on, Joe?
You can Google 11FS Pulse or find me on LinkedIn, just Joe Colchester.
Brilliant. Andrew, what about you?
You can find out more about Chip at getchip.uk and on social medias.
Awesome. Kish?
Lightyear.com. And you can see me designlightyear.com and twitter.com/ it's not called Twitter anymore, is it? On X at the Kish Patel. I try and share stuff there. I'm getting better at it.
I still call it Twitter too. I can't get it. Can't change. And Adam, last but not least, where can people find out more about you, about Metrobank?
The best place to contact me is on LinkedIn, Adam Tarpey. Alternatively, I try and attend as many fintech-related events as possible, like 11FS After Dark, so please come over and say hi. For Metrobank, we have lots of different channels where you can find us. We have stores up and down the country, or you can find out more about us remotely at metrobank.co.uk, where you can sign up to our different products and services.
Brilliant. And you can find me LinkedIn, Kate Moody, or drop me an email, kate@lnfest.com. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you've heard, follow our podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us to make it better and helps others to find this show. As always, if you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for LearnerFest or Fintech Insider or email podcasts@learnerfest.com. Or even better, as Adam says, come along to After Dark. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our audience gets a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.